Hello, my friends. Today's news seems even worse than yesterday's. Such a bad situation probably hasn't happened since the very start of the invasion, when the Russians were advancing very quickly and capturing a large number of settlements every day. Today, due to a breakthrough in defense and the advance into operational open areas in the Dobropillia direction, it's been reported that only a few days remain before the Russians could break through to the city, since already yesterday evening there were reports that Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups were operating near the city. Dobropillia. Russian SRGs are operating in the area of the city. Be careful possible attempts to infiltrate the city. After that, Ukrainian armed forces fighters reported that the Russians managed to cut the Dobropillia-Kostiantynivka highway. The Dobropillia-Kramatorsk highway has been cut and is under Russian control in the area of the settlement of Novovodyane, said Serhiy Sternenko. And just so you understand how quickly the Russians have begun to advance, only yesterday the Russians had basically secured positions in Zoloty Kolodязь, and by the evening there were already reports that they had cut the highway, which meant they had advanced about 4 more kilometers. That's why Ukrainian forces soldiers are already making their first grim predictions that Dobropillia has only a few days left. This shows that the situation is no longer under control and the Russians could capture Dobropillia even faster than Pokrovsk. This has also been reported directly by Ukrainian soldiers. The Russians have managed to probe the weak points in Ukraine's defenses and through constant pressure with superior infantry numbers advance near the villages of Kucherevya, Zoloty Kolodязь and Vesele near Dobropillia. At the same time, the Russians are continuing to push toward the Dobropillia-Kramatorsk highway. The project's assessment is that the situation in this area is developing quite chaotically. When the Russians find a problem in the defenses, they try to slip deeper in, quickly entrench themselves, and build up forces for further advances. Soldiers I spoke with noted that very well built Ukrainian defensive fortifications exist in this area, and if the Russians take them, we will not be able to dislodge them. One soldier warned that if events continue following this same scenario, Dobropillia will fall faster than Pokrovsk. Military analysts, after reviewing the map, concluded that between August 7 and 11, the Russians in this area were able to push through to a depth of about 15 kilometers and a width of 5 or 6 kilometers. The publication notes that this narrow salient, which the Russians have managed to seize, still leaves a chance to regain control of the situation. However, if it cannot be stabilized quickly, Dobropillia and the entire group of forces defending the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration could be at risk. On the other flank, this would create a threat of encircling Kostiantynivka. In the long term, this breakthrough could be dangerous for the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration, the analysts warned. In general, friends, this is what it means when they have reached open operational space and started moving at high speed. In fact, if this isn't stopped, we'll see what we saw at the start of the war, when the Russians were capturing large territories in just a few days. And we're lucky that the Russians themselves haven't fully realized that they've managed to reach operational space. They weren't prepared for such a rapid development of events. That's why we can see that for now, they don't have enough manpower to consolidate all these territories and take full control over them. So for now, this remains a gray zone but in the coming days or at most weeks, it's most likely that additional forces will be redeployed here to consolidate their hold on the newly captured territory. The front here has expanded very quickly, and now the Russians need even more troops. And Ukrainian soldiers are already appealing directly to the president because what's happening will lead to a catastrophe. Mr. President, I honestly don't know what exactly you are being told, but let me inform you. On the Pokrovsk-Konstantinivka line, without exaggeration, the situation is a complete disaster, and this disaster has been building for a long time, getting worse every day. The commanders who are now being appointed or have already been appointed to fix the unfixable will most likely be blamed for the disaster that's already happening. There is effectively no stable line of contact. Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad are nearly encircled. Kostantinivka is half encircled. The Russians are advancing toward Kramatorsk and Rushkivka. The problem has been growing since last year. This was publicly warned about, and it happened exactly as predicted. The cause of this problem is not the newly created corps, which inherited a disastrous situation with undermanned subordinate units, and not those certain individuals who, for the past year and a half, have effectively commanded nothing and have only relayed orders in line with General Staff directives. The systematic problem began with the depletion of reserves, the mass fragmentation of units across the entire front line, reports of a village taken as a victory against the backdrop of total collapses in entire directions, the distribution of mobilization resources to cronies, and the absolute lack of strategic and even operational vision of the theater of war among part of the military leadership. I'm an officer and I have a sense of dignity. My conscience is clear. Report over. To all officers who have accepted the rules of this game, I don't know what to say to you. I don't understand you. Friends, you can see that I try every day to show you only the truth about just how bad the situation is at the front, and I hide nothing. So, share this as widely as possible. Everyone needs to see the truth, otherwise, in the near future, we could lose half of Ukraine. The Russians have already broken through the front. Next, they could advance dozens of kilometers daily. At the same time, Putin has no intention of stopping, and late last night, Zelensky reported that, according to intelligence, Russia is preparing its forces for a new offensive operation.
Today there was also a briefing from the intelligence services and the military command about what Putin is counting on and what he is actually preparing for. In particular, this includes military preparations. He is definitely not preparing for a ceasefire or the end of the war. Putin is focused only on presenting a meeting with America as his personal victory and then continuing to act just as before, applying pressure on Ukraine just as before. There is no sign that the Russians have received any signal to prepare for a post-war situation. None so far. On the contrary, they are moving their troops and forces in such a way as to launch new offensive operations. If someone is preparing for peace, they do not act this way. We continue to inform our partners about the real situation on the battlefield, in diplomacy, and in Russia's planning for further actions.
So, most likely, the war will continue. Friends, be sure to share your opinion on this in the comments. And I'll say it again, send this video to everyone so that people know the truth. Because many settlements that were far in the rear have already started to evacuate. Today there are even reports about Sergiyevka, which is located 18 kilometers from Zoloty Kolodys, which the Russians have entered. Friends, the important thing is that many people talked about this, and everyone understood that it could happen. But for some reason, it's still happening now. And friends, when the Russians break through to open operational areas where there is no defensive lines or fortifications, drones will no longer help. For drones to work effectively, unmanned aerial vehicle pilots need to be positioned somewhere and controlling a specific road, village, or field. But when the front line is in one place and Russia has penetrated deep into the area where they were not expected at all, there will no longer be unmanned aerial vehicle pilots there, and as a result, we are back to the situation of 2022. Overall, share your thoughts in the comments. And friends, I'm not even talking yet about the huge number of shelling in Belozersk and other settlements, which are enormous in number. Okay, it's also very important to note today that Trump made significant statements ahead of the negotiations, saying he wants a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. The next meeting, Zelensky and Putin, or the two of them with me. I'll join if necessary, but I want the leaders to meet on their own. In the end, I'm going to put the two of them in one room. I'll be there or I won't, and I think it will get settled. We will have a meeting with Putin, and within the first 2 minutes, I will know for sure whether a deal is possible. How do I know? Because this is my business. I make deals. I expect to meet with Putin. I think it will be good, but it could also be bad. It's a bit surprising that Zelensky says, I need constitutional approval. So he has the authority for war and killing, but for a land exchange, he needs approval because there will be some kind of territorial exchange. I know this from the Russians and from conversations with everyone. Trump also said he would ask Putin to stop the war before the talks. I will talk to Putin and tell him, you must stop this war, you must end it, and he wouldn't dare argue with me. In addition, Trump said he would try to return the land to Ukraine. Russia has occupied a large part of Ukraine. They have seized important territories. We will try to return these lands to Ukraine. Overall, we are waiting to see how events will develop. There is a lot of information, but what will actually happen at the negotiations is still unknown because Putin is very cunning. If you agree, show your support in the comments. So, now, as not to drag out the video, let's briefly look at other fronts. In the Pokrovsk direction, assaults continue from the south, and the Russians are also pushing into Pokrovsk despite the collapse of the front north of the city of Rodinsk. This means they still have plenty of resources, and the breakthroughs continue. In the Novopavlivka direction, activity is high. The Russians are already advancing into the Dnipropetrovsk region, and in recent days they have even had some minor gains, but for now there have been no new changes in the past day. In the Velyka Novosilka direction, the situation is also gradually worsening. The Russians are assaulting Velyapole and Temyrivka, but so far there are no new changes here. The Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Hulyaipole direction, assaults on Malinivka and Olgivsk continue. However, the situation here remains stable, with the Ukrainian forces managing to hold the defense. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, A strong offensive is being prepared, and the Russians are pulling in resources, but so far there have been no new advances in the past day. In the Kherson direction, attacks on the islands continue. The Russians are not reducing the activity here, and the number of shelling is increasing day by day. The plan to break through to the right bank is real, and the Russians are gradually moving toward it. Now, moving on to the Konstantinivka direction. Here, assaults are taking place along the entire front line. So far, the Ukrainian side hasn't confirmed information about the encirclement of Ukrainian troops near the village of Klebanbek. However, Ukrainian forces on the ground report that the situation there is indeed catastrophic, and the Russians are trying to push the Ukrainian forces beyond their reservoir. Therefore, it's likely that in the near future we can also expect bad news here regarding changes along the front line. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are also maintaining high activity. They continue advancing along a broad front toward Siversk. They have managed to capture some positions, but so far there is no major breakthrough. In the Liman direction, the Russians carry out about 20 assaults daily, but they haven't been able to advance quickly, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Borova direction, the Russians are assaulting Novopavlivka, but otherwise the situation remains stable with no changes so far. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are also counting on the fact that we don't have enough troops to hold the defense and are planning to encircle Kupiansk soon. However, for now, the Ukrainian forces have been successfully repelling all attacks and there are no changes. In the Dvorichna direction, things are currently quiet. All previous Russian attacks have been unsuccessful. In the Kharkiv direction, it's also calm. Fighting is happening only around Vovchansk, but the front line there remains unchanged. In the Sumy direction, activity is minimal. There were only two assaults in the past day. All attacks on the border have stopped, and the situation remains unchanged for now. However, overnight, a Ukrainian soldier reported that Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad are most likely about saving. The operational tactical situation on the Pokrovsk front is gradually approaching a point where Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad can no longer be saved. For now, the critical moment hasn't arrived yet, but unfortunately, everything is hidden the way at the current moment. The agglomeration could still be saved, but not through frontal assaults. Attempts at those from our side have already taken place. The Russians adapted to those a long time ago. A big shout out to those who are wearing down the best units with senseless frontal attacks. On top of that, there is chaos in command due to the transfer of responsibility zones from operational tactical units to the corps level. Some can't agree on assigning attached units to a specific corps or on clearly defining the borders of responsibility zones, among other bureaucratic issues. Often, attached units end up carrying out tasks from the command of two corps simultaneously. Meanwhile, the Russians target the seams between corps and both corps rush to put out the fire at the same time. Resources aren't unlimited, and the Russians eagerly exploit this. This is exactly what happened on the Pokrovsk Dobropillia front. The Russians struck right at the seam between corps, and now we have these results. While everyone was busy eliminating sabotage and reconnaissance groups in Pokrovsk, including the military command, operational tactical problems appeared northeast of the city. Why did I put sabotage and reconnaissance groups in quotes? Because those were, and still are, not sabotage and reconnaissance groups, but small Russian infantry groups that, under precise drone support, successfully infiltrated deep into our lines. When you have several dozen of these small groups, they can crawl 10 or 15 kilometers in the same way. Letting them through is one thing. Driving them out costs the blood, sweat, lives, and health of our fighters, as well as the exhaustion of reserves. So even if that breakthrough at the corps seam toward Dobropillia and Ruzhkivka is localized, and we manage to push the Russians back a little, know that it comes at the cost of our losses. That's the reality. As you can see, the Russian command planned this operation so skillfully and effectively that they are now making gains that are nearly impossible to stop. Friends, please be sure to share your thoughts in the comments on why things turned out this way. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.